financial analysis, which is made up of the fund status or the percent funded and selecting a funding plan. Now I'm going to go into that a little more detail as I go forward, but it's made up of two parts. And as I go through this, you'll see why this is a critical part of doing the study, because then you're not just looking at it at a point of time, but you're also actually looking at the reserve study, projecting out into the future, taking a look at what's going to happen. The funding plans are the association's plan to provide income to a reserve fund to offset anticipated expenditures from as they occur. And there are a number of different choices. There's periodic assessments over the life of the assets. There are special assessments at the time of replacement. There's borrowing, or there's combinations of the above. And obviously, for any association, the reserve study helps you keep away from special assessments or borrowing. And all of the funding plans are made up of periodic uniform assessments over the life of the asset. Now, there's a few advantages of this type of funding plan. First of all, it helps to assure that the funds will be available. It reduces the likelihood of the special assessment. And I'm going to jump to the end, and I'm going to go back to the next one in a second, but it also preserves market value. CAI nationally, a number of years ago, did a Gallup poll nationally to see what makes people want to buy in associations. And it's all based on the number one driver is the look of the community. So when you're collecting money in a reserve fund to do replacements, the money is there to do the replacements. And by keeping your association looking young, by doing these replacements, it does preserve the market value. And it's one of the reasons why people want to buy into your community. Now, charge is current rather than future owners. What this means is that, let's say if somebody who lives in a community for 19 years and doesn't put any money into a reserve fund, then they move out, and the next year somebody moves in and there's a special assessment to replace the roof. What's happening is the person that moved in and is just moving in is paying for somebody else having lived under that roof for 19 years. So one of the advantages of a periodic assessment is that it keeps it equitable in terms of the people who are actually using the components, such as the roof, are the ones who pay for its replacement, rather than somebody who moves in later who never had the opportunity to use the roof. So keep in mind that the reserve study charges current rather than future owners. What are the different funding plans? And I'm going to show you an example of each one of them, but we're dealing with what's called full or proportional funding, baseline funding, threshold funding, and statutory funding. In the state of Pennsylvania and in New Jersey, there are no statutory requirements for reserve studies once a community association takes control of the community. In New Jersey, for example, though, it does require that developers, when they're developing a new community, include adequate reserve funds in the original budget. But in both states, once the association takes control, there's no statutory requirement that the association continue to fund reserves, although it is their obligation to fund reserves so that the association does not have to run into a special assessment or a borrowing situation. But now let me show you what the other three types of funding plans are.